Bruce All-Powerful is the account of a journalist named Bruce Nolan, Jim Carrey, who covers cushion stories for television news in Bison, New York. The story opens with Bruce in a bread shop, spidery hairnet yanked over his brow, perseveringly covering the biggest treat at any point prepared in Bison. Toward the finish of the arrangement, we are acquainted with one of the movie's running jokes, that is reality. Hustling back to the station, Bruce gets found out in rush hour gridlock and vents his dissatisfaction about the way that his life is in a go-no-place trench. Showing up later than expected to a significant gathering, individual staff members, including enemy Evan Baxter, Steve Carell, needle Bruce barbarously about his clownish inclusion at the pastry kitchen, further compounding his harshness about being slowed down on his profession way. In the trade with Evan, we see that Bruce has an energetic, however dim, funny bone and won't accept anything without a fight. After the gathering, Bruce asks his chief, Jack Baylor, Philip Cook Corridor, to consider him for the open anchor position. Sometime thereafter, Bruce watches the news with his live-in sweetheart, Beauty Connolly, Jennifer Aniston, at a working-class yet genial one-room loft. Sitting on the lounge chair with their canine, Beauty tries and, sadly, fails to enroll Bruce's assistants with a photograph collection remembering features of their relationship, yet Bruce is excessively distracted with feeling frustrated about himself until he chances upon a ex-appraised photograph of them having intercourse, and whisks Elegance off to the room. The following morning, Bruce drops Beauty off at the Red Cross to give blood. He's as yet feeling terrible, so she gives him her supplication dabs, saying he wants them more than she does. Bruce hesitantly takes the supplication dots, which are pointless to him since he never implores, and ridicules effortlessness for burning through her time giving blood. At the station, Bruce learns he's being sent into the field to cover a significant story at Niagara Falls, expecting from this obvious advancement that he is in line for the anchor position that just opened up. The maker lays everything out before the tremendous falls, with Bruce in an amusing umbrella cap meeting an older lady regarding early days at Niagara. Encircled by the gigantic surging of the falls, Bruce is intruded on mid-interview for a major declaration from the station, standing by energetically to hear that he got anchor. All things being equal, the position is granted to Evan, and Bruce has a genuine implosion before the camera, over and again offending Evan, obnoxiously manhandling the two interviewees, and afterward covering off his report with the assertion, "Back to you, fuckers." Obviously, the organization fires Bruce, and he is tossed out in the city with all his stuff, including an outlined photo of Walter Cronkite. Bruce answers with one more of his running jokes, the wry comment, "Be a beautiful." Bruce shows up later than expected to supper and provokes Beauty, who makes an honest effort to pacify him. In a fury at life, he turns on her, assembling their life average. She thinks about it literally, which aggravates him even more, and he rams out of the condo, shouting, "The most awful day of my existence," with a side request of responsibility please. Progressively irate, Bruce goes for a drive, shaking the supplication globules and reviling paradise. It's coming down hard as he escapes the vehicle, lost in the strife of his sentiments, proceeding to chide God, going across the roadway, without respect for approaching cars, to throw the petition dots as far out into the lake as he can. Back at the condo next morning, Bruce's beeper begins to go off over and again with a sharp scream. He doesn't perceive the number, lastly gets so irritated that he throws the beeper out into the road, where it gets run over by a vehicle. The canine, who isn't housebroken, pees on a seat, so Bruce takes him outside, just to hear the leveled beeper actually going off in the center of the road. Bothered indeed, and unfit to prevent the beeper from going off, Bruce calls the number and pays attention to a copying of somebody who obviously knows all that is happening in his life. Interested, he drives to the location he moved past the telephone, ending up in Bison's stockroom area. Bruce escapes vehicle to search for the location, stepping in a tremendous, foul puddle that sprinkles all around his pants. He enters a stockroom to observe that the ground floor is vacant aside from an African-American janitor, Morgan Freeman, cleaning the floor. Bruce requests bearings to room 7 on the 7th floor, observing a lot to his disturbance that the lift doesn't work. As he sets out toward the steps, the janitor requests that he assist with wiping the floor, and Bruce answers that he would be eager to assist in 7 days at 7 o'clock. Showing up on the 7th floor, Bruce ends up in an enormous, void room that is painted obvious white. As he calls out for help, the janitor moves down a stepping stool through an opening in the roof associated with a brilliantly lit room above. Bruce figures the janitor probably taken the lift to arrive in front of him, and watches while he takes off his coveralls and plunks down behind a white work area immaculately wearing a white formal attire, revealing, causing Bruce a deep sense of entertainment, that he is, indeed, God. God continues to demonstrate his powers by showing Bruce a file organizer that contains all that always occurred in his life. The cabinet is long to the point that it pushes Bruce as far as possible across the room, then, at that point, hammers shut again, hauling Bruce along behind. Bruce is as yet incredulous, so he and God play a game where God thinks about the number of fingers Bruce will hold up. Bruce is at long last persuaded that something abnormal is going on when he holds up one hand with 7 fingers similarly as God says, 7. Getting back to the focal point of Bison, Bruce swaggers down the road joyously, anxious to utilize his powers on anything he desires. He focuses his fingers at a fire hydrant, making it burst and water to fly out. He then, at that point, sees an appealing youngster stroll past, and he makes a whirlwind lift her skirt, providing him with a decent perspective on her clothing and base. Bruce sees a popular arrangement of garments being worn by a life-sized model in a shop window, and utilizations his powers to trade them with his own garments. As he swaggers further down the road, Bruce recognizes the posse that beat him up before, and chooses to get some vengeance on them. He requests that they apologize to him, yet they simply giggle, and Bruce is told by the posse chief that he'll get his conciliatory sentiment the day a monkey emerges from his butt. On account of Bruce's powers in any case, that was that day, and a monkey powers right out of the man's backside. Different hooligans run off, however are pursued by a beehive that Bruce lets out after them. He then, at that point, orders the monkey to return into the group chief. Bruce then, at that point, transports himself to the highest point of a high rise, makes a lightning storm, and announces, "I'm Bruce all-powerful. My will be finished." Back at their condo, Elegance is sat drinking wine, when she hears Bruce outside singing. At the point when she opens the entryway, he kisses her, and presents her with a bundle of roses, which he illuminates her or another variety. A cross-fertilization among tulips and daisies, which he calls to daisies. While Elegance goes to get a container for the blossoms, Bruce goes out onto the gallery, telling the sound system to play heartfelt music. He then, at that point, adjusts the night sky to make it more heartfelt. He eradicates the mists, makes new stars, and pulls the moon nearer. Effortlessness then, at that point, leaves onto the gallery, and the heartfelt sky, as well as Bruce running his hands through her hair, prompts her turning out to be extremely stirred. They begin kissing, before Elegance runs off to the restroom to plan for sex. Bruce then, at that point, runs into the room, utilizing his powers to switch the lights out, light candles, and make his garments, aside from his clothing, tumble off.